Hello everyone, how's it going? It's Nadie and welcome back to the series that I still don't have a name for. But we're basically just gonna be knitting and telling weird short stories on events that actually happened, but kind of make you think like, what the hell is life? Like, are there aliens? Is there magic? So if you can think of a good and sassy name that would look great on a t-shirt, please comment it down below. I appreciate it. She's been very much under the weather lately and my brain hasn't been quite as creative as it used to be. I can come up with a story, but I can't come up with a damn name. Anyways, my little cherubs, how you doing today? I hope wherever you're at in the world, you're having a spectacular day so far. I myself am doing great. It's all gloomy out. It's stormy. I have all the lights turned out in the house, and here we are with a story like I'm Edgar Allan Poe. It's a good day to be alive, and I'm so happy that you're here. Honestly, I don't know how anyone can just sit and listen to me talk, so the fact that there are people out there that do, I am just so grateful. I'm just here alone in my little office, but I'm really not alone. I have all of us. Just sending so many non-creepy hugs. And before we dive tits first into today's titillating tales, let's talk about today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Dossier. You want to smell expensive? Who doesn't? And Dossier is coming in hot with the fragrance game, baby. They have fragrances inspired by Ralph Lauren, Armani, Versace, Gucci, all the goodies without breaking the bank. Why spend hundreds when you can smell like $1,000,000 for a fraction of the price? Take one of my Dossier favorites, for instance, this little gem called Ambery Mint. This smells exactly like Versace. It's minty and citrusy sweet with vanilla and amber notes, very manly, yet also sensual and feminine at the same time. Or we have Aquatic Lime, which is a dupe for Armani's Acqua di Gio. This is a delicious combination of lime and jasmine and rosemary, cedarwood and watermelon, just yum. Trust me, if you're wearing this, I'm gonna be licking you. Not in a creepy way, of course. And lastly, we have Aromatic Watermelon, a dupe for Ralph Lauren's Polo Blue. It's a fresh mixture of watermelon, bergamot, patchouli, amberwood, and verbena, and honestly, it's a powerful smell. You will feel amazing wearing it. And all for around 30 to 40 bucks, like you can't beat it. And if you happen to pick up a fragrance that isn't quite your style, don't worry, you can get a full refund and your bottle will be donated to charity. I love that. Check out the link below and use the code to save some mala. Thank you so much to Dossier for sponsoring this video, and a huge thanks to you all for the love. Wait, what the hell are we talking about? Oh, my cat is making her appearance. Can we see her? No? Mia, have you come to knock down my shit? Come here, girlfriend. Come here. Girl, do not bite through this yarn. Anyways, Mia and I are very excited for today's stories because this first one I'm actually kind of familiar with. A lot of the stories we're gonna do, fine bitch. A lot of the stories we'll be talking about, I've not really heard of. They're just intriguing to me. Like, I'll read about it and be like, oh, interesting. So it's always fun when one pops up and I'm like, oh, I've heard of you, but I wanna know more. So, honey bunnies, without further ado, let's dive in. Imagine this, you're going on a nice little camping trip with lots of granola and trail mix, only to end up freezing to death mysteriously, and nobody knows how you and all of your friends die. Like, worst vacation ever, right? Well, it was January of 1959 when a group of 10 Russian students started on a journey to reach the top of Mount Otorten? I don't fucking know, I can't pronounce shit. Well, each of the students were experienced in hiking and knew the ins and outs of safety, and they knew emergency strategies and all that good shit. Like, they weren't stupid, they knew what they were doing. Well, a few weeks later, when the hikers failed to send even a peep over a telegram, people became very worried and started a search party. And then a month after the hikers initially left, their tent was discovered mysteriously emptier than a box of Krispy Kremes. Although an empty box of Krispy Kremes around here isn't that mysterious. But what was really extra fucking odd was that the front end of the tent was closed, like the door, but the sides were slashed from the inside out with a knife. Was something attacking them from the outside that the hikers were trying to stab? Whatever the hell it was, the campers sure as shit left in a hurry. According to their tracks, they left without boots, either just in socks or plain bare feet, like burr, bitches. And the footprints went on, and then they started to fade, and then randomly, right next to the edge of the forest, 2 bodies were found under a big-ass cedar tree. And the bodies were of 2 men who seemed to be having a pants-off dance-off in just their underwear and had taken a few branches from the surrounding trees to light a little fire. Obviously, they died of hypothermia because it was negative 13 degrees Fahrenheit and snowing. But why in the hell were they in their skivvies and away from their tent and from warm clothes? Like, that is weird, right? It's not like they were drinking, it's not like they were doing drugs, so what's the deuce, man? Well, not far from them were 3 more bodies, one of whose name was Dyatlov. Is that it? Did I say that right? But they ended up naming that pass after them, Dyatlov. I think that's it. God damn. And these bodies were like straight out of a horror movie. They were frozen mid-movement, and they seemed to be on their way back to the tent. But just like the 2 men, these individuals seemed to have died from the cold. Like, it makes sense. It's fucking freezing. But there were still 4 missing bodies. Where in the hell were they? It took 2 whole months for them to be discovered under 13 feet of snow in a ravine near the forest. And they'd been frozen, so their bodies were still pretty well preserved, but 3 of the 4 died much differently than the 4th student. Like, those 3 had injuries that killed them versus freezing to death. 1 died of a skull injury, 2 had serious chest fractures, and 1 of the 2 was missing her eyeballs and tongue. The 4th student was found alongside of them, frozen to death, but all 4 of them seemed to have injuries like what you'd sustain in a serious car crash. But bitch, where was there a car on top of a snowy mountain? This didn't make any sense at all. This led to a huge ass investigation, but it soon became apparent that there were no signs of a struggle, so like, what the hell? And weirder yet, there wasn't a single sign of another human or animal's involvement. But by May of 1959, investigators had to close the case because there was no more evidence to look at. There was no definitive answers as to why the students fled their tent and how 4 of them ended up with such traumatic injuries. There was speculation that these deaths had been caused by a local tribe for entering their land, but when the case was closed, the tribe was exonerated, especially because they were extremely peaceful. Of course, people immediately pointed their fingers towards like a Yeti or Bigfoot, but investigators were like, calm your tits, Felicia, there were no weird markings or anything on the students' bodies. Years later, the idea of an avalanche was brought to the table, which sounds plausible. They'd heard the rumbling and snow go over their tent, they were in a panic, they cut their way out of the snow-covered tent and didn't have time to get dressed or put on boots. 5 of the students had died from hypothermia and the other students had died from the impact of the snow. And the young lady with the missing tongue and eyes could be explained by scavenging animals. Sounds good, case closed, right? Well, not really, because there wasn't a single sign of an avalanche. Like, their little cookie jar of evidence was empty and they were grasping at crumbs, just licking the bottom of that jar like me with a case of Tim Tams. But the area really wasn't covered in excessive amounts of snow and there really wasn't a history of avalanches in the area. So we could probably call bullshit with that theory unless it was just a little baby avalanche, just a little tiny one. But then there was always the possibility of infrared noises caused by winds swishing around the mountains. And this may have just scared the shit out of the group, which then forced them to leave their tent. I'm not quite sure why they'd have to cut open their tent from the inside, but this fear may explain the lack of clothing. And in this panic, the 4 students that weren't hypothermic may have just slipped and fallen into the ravine, causing all of those serious injuries. And if it wasn't weird sounds that caused them to panic, it's plausible that sparks from their stove may have started a little fire in the tent and they had to cut their way out to avoid being burned alive. In fact, some of the students had been found with singed skin on their hands, but the footprints around their tent didn't show any signs of a rush on their way to seek shelter in the forest. So the theory that caused the most hubbub and still hasn't really been ruled out is that the students fell victim to a secret military test. There had actually been records of parachute mines being dropped in the area which were designed to detonate before they hit the ground. Maybe this could be why the students left their tent in such a hasty manner. In fact, a second group of hikers like 30 miles over had reported seeing glowing orange globes from the sky near where the students had made their campsite. So like, that's not suspicious at all. But this glowing orb theory had people wondering if this was maybe done by UFOs, but when you think of it, the mines do kind of make a lot of sense, right? Especially because several of the students were basically glowing from the amount of radiation in their clothes. And 5 of the group members had really tan faces, which couldn't have happened post-mortem because when you die, you don't tan. According to a group of independent experts who happen to know what the fuck they're talking about, think that that's probably the most plausible explanation. But I don't know, what do you think? Was it UFOs? Was it noise from the wind? Could it have been a little avalanche? Or do you think these students died because of a military test? I really don't think we'll ever know, especially if the military's involved. But because those other campers saw a glowing orb and some of the students had tan faces and radiation, I think we can kind of blame them, right? It totally may not have been on purpose, but it kind of sounds legit, doesn't it? You're young, you're hung, and ready to pilot a plane, no big deal. All is sweet tits until you're up in the air cruising along and you see a UFO, and minutes later you disappear, never to be heard from again. And that, my friends, is Spirit Airlines. No, I'm just kidding. The year was 1978 and a young man named Frederick pulled his plane into the tarmac to take off on his 125-mile journey to Kings Island. He'd have to cross the Bass Strait, which separated Australia and Tasmania, but this really wasn't an issue. People did it all the damn time. But then about 45 minutes into his journey, he was up Schitt's Creek and had to radio Melbourne's air traffic control to tell them that a mysterious unidentified aircraft was following him. I'd be a little bit scared too, wouldn't you? Shit, I get scared when my cat sneezes. But the response Frederick got back was, "Bitch, you are crazy. There's literally nothing else flying." But Freddie was convinced there was something there. He told control that whatever was there had 4 bright lights and was at least 1,000 feet above him. And this thing was coming in hot too, straight in his direction, and was playing fucked up games. The UFO would come at him, then come behind him, then come on him. Wait, wait, no. But apparently it was fast as fuck. Freddy would soon tell traffic control that he was having a hard time controlling his plane now too. The engine was choking and sputtering and he was getting really pissed. For 6 long minutes, Freddy was talking back and forth with a man on the ground who was confused as hell about the whole ordeal. Well, the operator's bladder emptied during the last minute of communication with Frederick, because the young man's last words were, "This strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering and it's not an aircraft." Then there were almost 20 seconds of a weird metallic scraping sound before all connection was mysteriously lost. The team immediately began an air and sea search, and local ships and planes were asked to help out as well. All that was discovered was an oil slick north of Kings Island, but there was no connection between that and the plane going down. And not much happened for a few years, and then in 1984, the Bureau of Air Safety officially said the reasons for Frederick's disappearance were unknown. But they said it was safe to assume that he's probably dead. And then a year later, a piece of plane washed ashore on a distant island with serial numbers that kinda matched part of Frederick's plane. It was only like that much of the serial number, but I guess all of those numbers matched. Nothing was set in stone, but for the Bureau, this put the nail in the coffin, and the truth started to come out. Frederick was, I guess, a fairly inexperienced pilot, to put it nicely, but he had applied to the Royal Airfare twice and had been rejected both times. And at the time of his disappearance, he had been trying to become a commercial pilot, but failed all 5 of the license exams. So like, I'm all for following your dreams, but also, pick a new career, maybe? I don't know, it's good to have options. But to top all that, I guess he'd been in trouble way more than once, and his ass was handed to him all up and down by aviation authorities for straying into controlled zones. And not just that, but he'd deliberately fly into a cloud, which I guess can rip apart a whole fucking plane. Big no-no, Freddy, tisk tisk. But the whole reason for his flight was also hella suspicious and was never really fully established. Like, he said he was headed to Kings Island to grab some friends, but there was literally nobody there waiting for him. Suspicious much? I think a lot. He'd also said he went over to the island to pick up crayfish, but there wasn't a single record of him having ordered any. Was he gonna scoop them out of the water himself or what? And remember Freddy's call with the operator about him seeing a UFO? Frederick's dad was later in an interview and said he was obsessed with UFOs. In fact, Freddy had allegedly seen them before, and one of his biggest fears was being abducted by one. And this led to a strong suspicion that the whole point of the flight wasn't to grab fish or friends, but to search for UFOs. But according to Papa Freddy, the fact that his son just randomly disappeared without a single trace only confirmed the existence of UFOs. We'll flash forward decades to 2013 when a retired air pilot got his hands on the 300 and something page case files surrounding this, and deduced that this was totally 100% due to inexperience. And this is totally just his opinion, nothing is concrete, it's just his theory. But he assumed that Freddy had lost control of the plane when he saw the tilted horizon, which he then tried to correct and just overcompensated. This presumably put his plane into what I guess is called a graveyard spiral, which happens when the pilot becomes kind of disoriented. In a nutshell, the pilot thinks their equilibrium is telling them that they're leveling the plane out, but they're actually spiraling to the ground at a really quick speed. Like, that's some scary shit. Maybe this spiraling caused Frederick to land in the water. I don't know why there'd be, what, like 20 seconds of metal scraping? But if the plane was kind of tilted, that would explain why the engines were sputtering. But what about those lights Freddy had seen above him? Well, the retired Air Force pilot had 2 possible explanations. Either the planets Mars, Venus, and Mercury were hella bright that night, or Freddy was very disoriented and was actually flying upside down and was seeing his own reflection in the water below him. Once again, so freaking scary, like I could never. But it also does kind of make sense, doesn't it? But still, the most popular theory does point to the presence of UFOs, which I kind of like that theory the most because, it sounds fun. But there actually have been an awful lot of reports with mysterious green lights right around where Frederick had been flying. In fact, there was a photographer that set up a camera directly where Freddy had allegedly gone down, and it recorded objects flying moving at least 200 miles an hour. Unfortunately, like always, the footage is too blurry and not clear enough to distinguish what the foreign objects are, but shit, 200 miles an hour, that's fast. Some people wonder if Freddy faked the whole fucking thing and is just living his life as someone else. Reports came in that some random plane had landed quite a ways away from where he had originally wanted to land, and he definitely did have enough fuel to make it farther than his original destination. But what do you think? Was he abducted by aliens? Do you think he crashed? Is he living abroad with a new life? I kind of wonder if it's UFOs, like that would definitely be kind of interesting. But having read up on how easy it is to become so disoriented as a pilot, it kind of does make you wonder if his plane was upside down and he was seeing his reflection and that's why the engines were sputtering. They weren't getting no gas. I just don't know, but it's a main reason why we have to question everything. But there we go, my loves. Thank you so much for being here. As always, I love doing this and I love having you here with me. If you want a little bit more me in your life, head over to my Patreon. it's patreon.com/poplux. You get videos a day early, you get Patreon-only content, and best part, it's cheap, fun, and fancy, just like me. And don't forget, my newest collection of Repop is available at repopcosmetics.com. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at officialnady, and you can follow me online at thepoplux.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you again soon. Bye!